Since the earliest days of role-playing games, there have been published modules and adventures that provided content and play. With the advent of the PDF and online sales markets, it's been possible for creators to publish their own adventures. But how does the indie creator get their adventure noticed? Where do you find artists and editors and playtesters? What are the best games to write an adventure for? And which ones have communities that welcome indie adventures? This week, SM Hillman brings you games you might like if you're a fan of Traveler by Mark Miller. Then, we turn to what is happening this week in our Go Indie Minute to talk about this week's March of the Writers. Finally, we find out who will get to say the phrase in this week's game and epilogue. So reach for your dice, get your maps, and tell your party it's time to playtest your masterpiece. We are all set to make that mega dungeon on This Week in Indies with your host, SM Hillman.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another great week for This Week in Indies. I'm your host, SM Hillman. A reminder to like and subscribe, check out other content we have here on Go Indie Now. Today, we're going to talk about publishing RPG adventures and a little bit about books and stories that model themselves on that as well. I feel like that's relevant, especially since so many writers of adventures are also authors in some way. But before we start kicking the doors or kicking down doors and setting off poison traps, let's go ahead and have our panelists introduce themselves, starting with Ken.
Hi, I'm Ken Lang. I write lit RPG and mythic science fiction. Pretty much I got into this because it was a hobby that started making me money. So it's pretty much about me. I just enjoy the writing and putting out new books.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here with us. David?
I'm David Green. I live in Galway in Ireland, so getting ready for St. Patrick's Day tomorrow. And I write epic fantasy, urban fantasy, cozy fantasy. I'm a big TTRPG player. I would love to write some campaigns like professionally. I think that'd be really, really fun. But I've been playing games all my life, TTRPGs, RPG games, video games, and I think they kind of have a huge influence in the stuff that I write. So really looking forward to talk about it.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. You should know that tomorrow on our Hit the Dice will be some of us will be celebrating St. Patrick's Day while we play. And the game is going to be set in Galway, future Galway.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Cool. I'd love to know what it's going to look like.
So would I. Thank you so much. SG?
Hi, yeah. I'm SG Tosh. I write urban fantasy, paranormal fantasy, and supernatural suspense. And my first series was actually borrowed and based pretty heavily on mechanics from Dungeons and Dragons. I have not written an RPG proper. I've DM'd games, and of course, people who watch Go Indie Now will recognize me from Hit the Dice as a regular.
Thank you so much. Just a reminder, everyone out there, I am the worst production person in the world when it comes to these things. So if things are slow or wonky, that's entirely my fault. All right. So let's go ahead and, Ken, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit, is there a memorable published adventure, like one that was published by a company that is for you is memorable? Could be any game, but something that you enjoyed playing once or many times over.
It was a old D&D, one of the original ones, called the Temple of Elemental Evil. And that's kind of where I kind of got into the Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop. And it was just a lot of fun. I want to say it was a spider goddess, Loth maybe, that was in charge of the temple. maybe not. It's been years. It's been about 40 years since I played. But that was probably my favorite. That's what got me into tabletop, and it was just like I said, that was a joy because it got it got all my friends together. We got to be in one place at one time, and actually did that for almost 2 years, which, as you know, is back in the day is a big deal. It's easier now, I think, with the virtual. People can get in, make more time for it. But back then, when you're a teenage kid and trying to play all that, that's probably my favorite. I died a lot. And I pulled the junior thing out every time a character would die, just instead of re-rolling if they would let me. But of course, several times they wouldn't let me, and I had to re-roll. But yeah, I died a lot. So, but that was probably my favorite game, favorite tabletop. And then the video game came out, which was horrible, but it was still the same game, same tabletop. And I actually still have that around here somewhere. Sadly, it will not play on new computers. So, or at least I don't know how to make it play. So that's
Yeah, a lot of.
um,
Yeah, I was gonna say a lot of the older ones depends on if they've had that emulator or and they've been upgraded. Sometimes like grand old games will upgrade them. What? How? Obviously, you write lit RPG, and how big? I mean, it's maybe an obvious question, but how big an influence was your role playing game days on the writing of lit RPG?
very heavily. It showed the importance of stats. How you don't get the round playing in lit RPG. That I think that would be too dull. But the turn-based play. But it taught me how to use stats and figure out spells and all those type of things. Where if you just try to make it up, that's the thing with all my writing though, is that I try to make up as little as possible and just make variations thereof. There's no reason to create the wheel again. So, if you kind of got the general idea, concept of how something should be written, and I got all that from D&D, the first edition, and I didn't get to play again until I didn't get to change editions till third, and then again at fifth. So, but yeah, the way that they write the spells, and instead of trying to make up maps, I usually take malls, the old abandoned malls, and the sign "You are here" in the mall. I'll use that as my map basis because, again, there's no reason to try to make up a map on your own. And that's how I create my dungeons or cities or things of that nature.
Nice. Very nice. Thank you. David, what about you? Is there a memorable published adventure, something that you played a lot or you really liked?
I actually came to TTRPGs a little bit later on. It was video games were my first thing, but it was always the kind of ones that were based on like the rules of D&D. So the one that I kind of really loved and has had like an amazing influence on my writing because I basically like not ripped it off, but I heavily influenced by it, is Dragon Age. Dragon Age Origins. So that came out in 2004 or 2005. And obviously I played other things before that. I played like, Baldur's Gate, um, Neverwinter Nights and all that kind of stuff. But Dragon Age was like obviously taking that kind of those rules and putting it into like a 3D world that you can interact with, and also kind of combining. I used to love choose your own adventure books when I was a kid, which is funny because I'm autistic and I don't like the choice that it presents as well. I get very, very panicked about like I need to know what both of these things are, but I like them anyway because it kind of sparked the imagination of looking at stories from different ways. So with the likes of Dragon Age Origins, it came out. It brought that kind of player choice mechanic into it, with this kind of fantasy world and the whole kind of stats behind it and everything else like that. But then also the kind of stuff it was doing story wise, it was doing stuff that I'd not really seen before in a fantasy world. like elves being like an underclass, which is like, you know, the Witcher was also doing that, but I hadn't come across the Witcher at that point because I don't think they've been translated and widely translated into English at that point. So they were doing that kind of thing, which was really interesting because usually in a lot of like fantasy stuff, like, you know, unless they were like a dark elf or a drow, the elves would be like this kind of like exalted, beautiful kind of culture that people kind of aspired to or was kind of otherworldly in a little way. And like Dragon Age kind of took that, but also did it as in, well, what would happen to like elves if they were living with humans? How would humans actually react to elves? And it was the first one that kind of really explored that, and that really kind of fired a lot of the kind of inspiration and creativity in me, I suppose. And also it kind of looks at different things about, like, you know, the responsibility of magic, of being you know, if you had these magical powers, like, you know, should you be allowed to just exist freely, and is there something that you should answer to? Should there be some kind of oversight to that, and what does that oversight look like? And so it's all these like really kind of very heavy questions that it was kind of asking, and this kind of world that I'd grown up looking at. And from that, I kind of got into like TTRPGs and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, Dragon Age was the first one that kind of really hooked me, I think, I suppose.
So the thing I remember about Dragon Age, and this is not a negative to the game at all. The first one I played, I remember the character comes in, or an NPC comes in, an old friend of the family. I'm like, this guy's going to screw us over. And like within 10 minutes of dialogue, he has, in fact, you know, murdered your parents and everything like that. And like, okay. But I feel like it was taking it took a very grim view, and the elven ghetto, right, that you experienced was I had the same kind of visceral reaction to, like, oh, okay, so these are not token selves, right?
No, yeah, exactly. And that, like, you know, I explored that heavily in my epic fantasy series. That, I mean, when I say like I'm inspired by Dragon Age, it was that thing particularly of looking at that and seeing, like, you know, how would someone like us react to these kind of people? I thought Dragon Age did it in a really interesting way, and it was a way that you can kind of see, if you look at it through our history of particularly of, like, you know, white Europeans, like it rings very, very true. And it was very unusual, and at that time in fantasy to kind of, and there's not a lot that's done the same thing either, like to kind of explore it. So it was interesting, and I do have an affinity for elves. It's probably the Tolkien nerd in me that, like, I do love elven culture and elven stuff. So, and whenever I play, like, you know, D&D or anything, I always tend to go as an elf. So yeah, it was good. It left a lasting effect on me anyway.
Have you to nerd out in that regard for just a second? Have you played any of the Lord of the Rings games, RPGs like MERP or the One Ring?
Let me just. It's never far away from.
Oh, I love that game.
Yes, yeah, it's great. I love it. Yeah, I love it. It's probably my favorite TTRPG. And like Free League in general are brilliant. All the stuff that they do is fantastic. So yeah, the One Ring is great. Yeah.
It uses the D12, which is my favorite die. So.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. SG, what about you? What adventure, video game, or whatever inspired you, your writing and your role playing?
So I'm sitting here, you know, thinking, I haven't thought about that question a really long time, and it's funny how things work out, because the very first, I was a little bit older than I think most people are when they get into D&D. I was I was around 20. I was in college. I hung out with people who played it in high school, but I never got invited, or I was, you know, doing school or whatever. For whatever reason, I'd never done it until college. And then a small group of friends invited me to play. And it was a Ravenloft campaign, which I absolutely loved. And I haven't thought about this in years, but one of the characters in it, the DM, decided to port in Ash Williams from Evil Dead. And it was, just really fun, very, that Victorian Gothic kind of thing. And then flash forward many years later, I played in a number of campaigns after that. That was the only Ravenloft campaign I ever got to play, which is a little bit sad because I think we just kind of ran out of scheduling. Like the schedules didn't work out after a few campaigns, or a few sessions, and we didn't get to finish, which kind of ended up being an issue every time I tried to play after that, with a few exceptions. But then when my first series, Dead Mall, which I've talked about on this show before and on Go Indie Now before, is not only borrows like monsters and mechanics and things from D&D, but is also based on Army of Darkness with a character based on Ash Williams as well. So I actually hadn't put that influence together until right now, because it came about in a completely different way. But yeah, I would say it's weirdly directly influenced my first series.
Yeah, Curse of Strahd, Ravenloft, they're all it's one of the classics, right? The original I6, I remember the module number I6 from back in the day. And I think while it's never been my favorite, it's the favorite of a lot of people. A lot of people love every iteration of Strahd and every iteration of that adventure. And I suspect it's probably influenced quite a few game designers as well as authors.
Yeah, I mean, even though Dead Mall has nothing to do with Ravenloft, really, that sort of aesthetic follows through to other stuff I've written, Misadventure being the most recent, and just kind of other things in general. This idea of portaling between worlds and the Gothic sort of misty Victorian thing. Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm sad I didn't really get to spend a whole lot of time in that world. I would love to go back and play that again.
Well, there's definitely, I know there's a 5e adventure for it that's updated it. Yep.
Cool.
So
maybe I'll go find it.
Cool. All right. Before we go too further, let's go ahead and check some comments out. AF Stewart, AAF, how are you doing? Thank you for being here. Miss Aliciaful, hello everyone, says hello everyone. And I've just finished writing an RPG in the middle of editing it at the moment. She says as she procrastinates to it, I hear you. I owe somebody a new version of 6s and 8s, and I gotta finish that up. Yeah, right, exactly. I had no idea how to do it, but you get on with it anyway. So yeah, I mean, just a little bit. When I was 10, I picked up, or I got for Christmas, thanks Dad. I mean that, thanks Dad. That's not sarcastic. Our father got the old purple Moldvay BX D&D for basic D&D for our family, and I really took to it. But within 6 months, the precocious 10-year-old that I was like, oh, let's see if I can mess with these mechanics. So I was already taking it apart and rewriting it at that point. So, all right, excellent. Actually, let's kind of start with you for this one. When you're writing an adventure for, if you're DMing, do you and this may or may not be related to your novel writing as well, or your prose writing, I should say. Do you follow a template? Do you have an outline, or are you like an adventure pantser?
It's been a while since I've DM'd, but whenever I do it, it follows how I write. It's pretty wild. I don't typically follow a template. I'll take the basics and just kind of build from there, and that can be really fun, and also it can get a little bit scary because I sometimes find myself being pushed to places by the players that I didn't realize they were going to go, and I have to come up with an answer and stats and things really quick. So I definitely I've never used like a pre-planned campaign, and it's a good exercise though, because it really forces you to think on your feet. And I think it's helped with my writing too, because it's a lot easier to come up with answers to like questions from people who aren't really there, who are just in your head, than people who are actually waiting for you to come up with something while they're trying to play a game.
Right. I was going to ask that. Basically, ask that very question. Right. How does writing the adventures or working on your situations in RPG influence or help with your writing? And you mentioned that. So
yeah, I actually did last summer. I did a presentation on how I use the theory and mechanics and things of D&D to just write. Theoretically, you could apply it to any book in any genre, and that's heavily based on the fact that like how you build characters in D&D, for me anyway, is very similar to how I build characters in my books. These sort of character brainstorm sheets. You can literally just use a character sheet to build each of your main characters and even some of your secondary characters. So that's the character portion of it definitely heavily influences how I write. The plotting, not so much, because I kind of sort of just find it along the way, like I do with my campaigns, like I prefer with most campaigns I'm in. So, and then secondarily, the world building aspects of it too. I do take a lot of like, I can, read a setting and sort of be like, okay, this is the details they use to build their world. Now I'm going to, kind of answer the same questions that they did for the world I'm building. And that helps flesh it out a little bit more.
Right. A lot of the games, especially the older ones, and then of course, if folks are familiar with the OSR, this is part of the OSR games often, is they'll have tables and things like that in the back where you can roll randomly to determine cities and populations and stuff. Some of them get quite detailed in that regard. Thank you much. David, what about you?
Is it if I'm a pantser or a plotter for the DMing? Is that the?
You had mentioned you're starting to work on an adventure that you might publish at some point, but in general, yes. Are you a pantser or a plotter when it comes to doing RPG work?
I'm kind of like I think so I only run games every so often, and the ones that I run are actually for my son. I tend to prefer to be a player in them, just because I I would want to like plan for as many eventualities as possible, but like obviously you can't, because once you create something, it's got quite a so my kind of like thought on creating stuff anyway is quite similar to RPG gaming, really, is that you can create something and you can have it all laid out, and then but that once then it's out in the world and someone interacts with it, it doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to the people that are interacting with it, and they respond to it in different ways, in very, very unique ways. And there might be somewhere on the path that you intended, but they might be somewhere completely different as well. And I think that's the same with books. It's the same with music. It's the same with painting and drawing and whatever else. But it's the same with TTRPGs as well. So you could construct a scenario or a world or a campaign, but as soon as you drop players into it, it could go in any direction. You can have as many things planned as possible, but you have to be able to roll with the punches as well. So for me now, where I am in my life, I'm too busy to kind of to do that because I'm writing, I'm secretary for the British Fantasy Society, and I have my son and all this kind of stuff. So I prefer to play, but I do play a game with my son and a few kind of other people, and it's set in one of my worlds from my books, and it's a very, very simplified version of D&D rules, right? And of like 5th edition rules basically, but it's to the point where like the reason I was doing it was because I my son is also autistic and has really kind of struggles with losing, and not in the fact that he wants to win all the time. It's that he feels something bad is going to happen if he doesn't win. So what I did was I thought um, TTRPG was a perfect kind of environment to kind of show him that, you know, you might have something in mind, you might what the role might be bad, not what you're intending to do, but life moves on. Something else just happens. It's not, you know, there's no critical fails or anything like that in the game. There's no, in the ones that I play in, there's no like deaths or anything like that. But you know, there might be consequences to a less than great role and everything. And that was the whole point of it, is just to show them that, like, and I think it's a great thing. I actually think kids should play it in school, to be honest with you, because it teaches this kind of thing where it's like, you know, you have to think on your feet. You've got to be able to adapt to different sort of situations. And it also kind of teaches that even though something has happened that you didn't want to happen, it's not the end of the world. You know, something else might happen because of it. So with that, and obviously playing with it as a child, with a child, and their imaginations are so incredible, and the kind of, you know, he's 7, so he's kind of like, he looks at rules and thinks, well, why is that the case? Why is this the rule? You have to be kind of ready to see where he wants to take it. So, for example, like, it's set in a world that I know very well, that I've built from the ground up. And when he made his character is Steve from Minecraft, who is not a part of this world whatsoever. So I was like, well, how do you fit Steve from Minecraft into this world? So I was like, well, he's probably going to be an artificer, so let's look at that kind of things. And you know, you've got to just be able to do that. You know, he's very kind of adamant that he doesn't want to kill any creatures or anything like that, even the evil ones. So it's kind of incorporating that into the game and kind of doing all this sort of stuff. So yeah, and which is very different to how I kind of write books, where like I would kind of be like, you know, 75% plot and then plotting and 25%, let's just see where it goes. So yeah, there's a long answer. I'm not sure if I've actually answered the question, but that's it.
No, absolutely. I appreciate that. You've also kind of foreshadowed the next question after that, so twice now. So we'll get to that in just a moment. Thank you, though. No, that's fantastic. Ken, what about you? Tell us about your process a little bit when it comes to creating an adventure, or novel, or both.
Let me add a little something to his. One of the things about if it plays in school, it also teaches teamwork, mathematics, negotiation, cooperation, and lots of other things that are very helpful to help a young person grow into a functional adult. Time management actually helps with people in their finances. Tabletop games are very educational, even though most people don't think they are. So sorry about that. I just wanted to add that. As far as me, so when it comes to my lit RPG stuff, I do a lot of plotting in advance. I know where the story is going, like the end of the series, and everything, and I have all the major events plotted out. It's the in-between stuff that I allow to organically develop. And it's kind of like driving a car at night. You can only see as far as your headlights go, but as long as you have a map and you know where you're going, you'll eventually get there. And that's kind of the way I feel about writing. You know, you just keep plugging away until you get to your destination. You have to have but for me, I have to have a destination. Some people are able to just start from start to finish, be able to just wing it. I am not one of those people. But letting things organically develop between major events has made my books significantly better. I was just writing a scene earlier this morning where it kind of got away from me from my original plan of what I wanted to do, but it helped get to the end goal in a much better fashion. So I think listening, sticking to your plan, but listening to your inner voice guide you to where you need to be is probably the best thing I've ever learned in my writing. I don't DM. My social anxiety would not be able to take that. Uh, so pretty much I just write my books and I go from there. So, but that's pretty much my 2 cents on how I do things is cut it all out and then let the organic stuff happen.
Right, absolutely. Do you, did your experiences as a player help with that at all?
Well, yes. I mean, some of the things where, so you don't get, of course, you don't get critical fails or hits in a book in that respect, but learning how to adjust when a plan fails as you're going along is what allows you to make adjustments on the fly. And that's part of the educational part that I was talking about earlier and David was talking about, is that it just helps you accept that it did not go your way and you need to kind of adjust your course. And when I first started writing my original series, which was the mythic science fiction, I had no leeway. And that's why I stopped for a year before I started writing again on it. It got too rigid. And so, yes, the being able to adjust and make a plan that's different than to whatever the situation in a book proposes, and then letting things organically develop was probably, like I said, it was the best lesson I ever learned. So, but there's that, and sometimes, like I said, you get advice from somebody, or you hear something, or you write a scene and you go, "Oh man, that did not go the way I planned, but it's so much better than I ever thought it would be." And it's just accepting those little gifts sometimes that make things better.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's true in our writing and in, when we're playing as well, right? You're not sure. You have an idea of what's going to happen, but then another player might perform something else or suggest something else, and suddenly everybody's rolling in a completely different direction.
Yeah.
So before we get to our next question, let's have our, hold on. Here we go. Nope, that's not it. Okay, here we go. Let's have our indie game connection from SM Hillman. That's me. Welcome to the Indie Game Connection for your third weekend in March. I'm SM Hillman. Today, we're going to talk to you about games that you might like if you are a fan of The Original Traveler by Mark Miller, which is one of the first, Traveler's one of the first science fiction games. It's probably the most memorable for reasons not entirely accurate, where you could die. I mean, you could die in character creation, but it's not entirely accurate. First game we have for you today is Stars Without Number, published by Synonymous Publishing, author Kevin Crawford. The year is 3200, and mankind's empire lies in ashes. The jump gates fell 600 years ago, severing the links between the myriad worlds of the human diaspora. Now, the long isolation of silence falls away as men and women return to the skies above their scattered worlds. Will you be among them once more? Stars Without Number, Revised Edition, is an old-school-inspired game of sci-fi adventure, one built from the ground up to encourage sandbox play and simplify a GM's job in providing it. Frontier mechanics are employed to forge new worlds and explore new possibilities. Guidelines built on long experience used to help a group venture in wholly new directions. Within the full-color pages of Stars Without Number Revised Edition, you'll find a lot of game to play. The second game we have for you today is Tiny Frontiers Revised, publisher Gallant Knight Games, author Alan Barr, and a host of authors for the micro settings. Powered by the Tiny D6 engine, with streamlined mechanics that utilize only 1 to 3 single 6-sided dice in every action, characters that can be written on the 3x5 note card, and easy to understand and teach rules, Tiny Frontiers Revised is great for all groups, ages, and experience levels. Featuring exciting micro settings designed to jumpstart your imagination campaign, written by some of the most talented writers out there. Tiny Frontiers Revised will provide an easy launching pad for conventions, one-offs, or short campaigns. Designed to emulate classic space opera and providing an open framework for exciting stories, Tiny Frontiers Revised is here, completely compatible with the other Tiny D6 games. Tiny Frontiers Revised is a fully standalone game. M-Space, publishers Frostbite Books, author Clarence Red. M-Space is a D100-based science fiction role-playing game. Everything needed to play is included. With this book, you can create imaginary universes and play characters from a variety of cultures and careers. They can pilot starships, meet strange alien life forms, and travel deep into unknown space. And finally, our last game for today is another reprint of an original, or another edition of original. 2300 AD, publisher Mongoose Publishing, author Colin Dunn. 300 years from now, humanity is claiming worlds far from Earth. Despite nearly destroying itself in the Twilight War, despite all the wars since, humanity has held on and kept its dream alive. 2300 AD is a story of that dream, as humanity reaches for the stars. This is a richly developed hard science fiction universe, with ships spinning against the night as they propelled by the stutter warp drive, a true violation of physics as we now know it. Airships, helicopters, and hovercraft are common sights on worlds of the frontier, while space planes and rockets carry explorers and traders to orbit, and from there, starships take them across the gulf of space to the colonies. And that's all for this week on Indie Game Connection. Have a great week, folks. All right, that was our Indie Game Connection. Thank you. I guess thank you to me, since I did it. But thank you, SM Hillman, for sharing that with us this week. David, I'm going to not quite pick on you, but call on you. You had mentioned two things that came up. That was a question that I was going to ask. And the question is, can you fail in an adventure without dying? Are there one or more fail conditions available when you're designing an adventure or writing an adventure? And you brought up what you do with your son, teaching him that it's, that you can fail and things just move in a different direction, but also the choose your own adventure books where I was like, I need to know the outcome of the choice I didn't make. So I would go back and, often it was a fail state, right? You might not, you might not, I did a lot of mystery ones. You might not solve the mystery, right? Or succeed in the adventure. Talk a little bit about that, if you would. And how that affects us as writers and how that affects us as players as well.
It's an interesting one because, I think we in life we fail a lot, and it isn't, and it rarely in our lives when we fail is it the end of our life, right? So I think it's it's an important thing to know that that there is some things that can be very, very dangerous to you, but I also think it's a way of, I think we can kind of, as a society, I think we can heighten the effects of failure too much, particularly to young people, and they become and neurodivergent people as well, and it becomes failure becomes something that like absolutely has to be avoided at all costs, because it becomes built up in our minds that you can't come back from it, and in reality, like you learn a lot more from your failures than you do from your successes. You learn from your mistakes. You learn from the times when things don't go quite the way that you're expecting, and it's a much more normal kind of thing. But obviously, marrying that with the stakes of like a hero's journey or a quest or a campaign or these kind of heightened situations, there needs to be some kind of peril. So I understand that, but I do think that, particularly when you're dealing with younger minds, that it needs to be kind of descaled a little bit, de-escalated. That, like, failure is a normal part of life, and that's okay. It's okay to fail. The most important thing is to try, and then if you do fail, take that learning and bring it on. And because that's the way that, when we're all, everyone on this panel are all people that write books, and we don't write the perfect book the first time. We try different things out. We fail in some things. We might even book we end up publishing might fail in some kind of way. It might not be perfect. It's an imperfect thing at the end of the day. But a lot of the joy comes from the imperfections. And that's the same as when you're playing like a TTRPG. Some of it, the most fun comes when it goes off the rails a little bit, and it's not what you quite expected. So I think it's an important thing to kind of remember, and kind of when you are creating these things, is just think about the stakes and because it can upset people. And I always kind of when I kind of think about this, I always think about the TV show Supernatural, and I quite like how it ended. I wish COVID hadn't happened and they were able to kind of do the original plan. The story of, like, and spoilers for Supernatural, but I'm going to just go for it. The idea of Dean, who was, like, faced off with so many different things and overcome so many different odds, being killed by something that he's taken care of so many different times. I can see why people don't like it, because it's kind of like you've escalated it so much that failure hasn't been a problem before, and you can overcome things, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So this idea that something very, very run of the mill causes like a critical failure, I can see why some people don't like that. But I think also, like, in those kind of stakes, sometimes it is also needed. You kind of need to be reminded that these things that they were doing is dangerous, and it could have happened at any time. So it's a balancing act, but I think it needs to be modelled on the kind of audience that you're looking for. If you're playing with adults and they're able to cope with the kind of fact that that character might end, and you have some games that have that as part of the world that it's built into, like One Ring, for example, that we talked about earlier. You can have heirs, you can, in case your character does die and what have you. But I think if you're playing it with kids, and you kind of, or if you if you're writing like middle grade and younger, you have to be very, very careful about that, and try not to make failure seem that it's like this thing that you just can't come back from, in my opinion. Stunned silence.
I'm not sure where he went.
Here I am. So I'm sorry about that. I unmuted myself. SG or Ken, what do you think about fail states in gaming and in the writing?
Well, I think. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Ken.
No, good. I didn't hear you. He said, "I'm sorry." Oh, it's me, obviously. Failure is a part of life, I don't have a perfect book or even a decent book on my fifth try. My files are, my first draft goes into, it's literally called the first draft folder, and then it goes to the second draft folder. And as he says, most usually failure in general isn't a terminal offense. And I think we have built that up just a little too high for everyone. We've all been in a situation where failure could, or at least some of us have, I guess, failure could lead to very bad things happening. But we've either survived them, or the consequences weren't what we thought they would be. And I think that's usually the biggest problem, is we build up what we think is going to happen is usually much worse than what will actually happen. And so I think that failure, getting used to that and being able to adapt to it and accept it and moving on, is a very important lesson that the games do teach you. Be a video game or the tabletop games, or just in life in general. It's just accepting the fact that you're not perfect, and that's okay. And you can move past it and become, hopefully you learn more from a mistake than you do getting everything right the first time. And if you ever try to be perfect, you'll never do anything. Like when people say, if you wait for the perfect moment to do something, you'll never do it. And if you think that you're going to get through your life without making any mistakes or failing, that's not going to happen. So I think that learning these things through games is an extremely acceptable way. And I don't know how many old school gamers here we have, but for instance, like Pac-Man, you used to play it until the game got too hard for you to ever beat. And I like now the video games where you can try on the same boss over and over again until you finally learn the strategy to defeat that boss. Because, like you said, you've learned something, whereas you can't, learn to get past certain things when they just get too hard. So I do think that we've adjusted our gaming systems. I know some people go, well, games used to be better. They really didn't. So, and that type of thing, I think failure should be more acceptable. And pretty much it.
I think there are a lot of Dark Souls players out there right now who are feeling very much what you're saying right there. SG, what do you think?
It's funny you mentioned Dark Souls because that's one of the first birthday presents I ever bought for my husband, and he got so frustrated from it. So that was fun. But anyway, I agree with kind of what everyone has said. Like, failure is demonized in our society, and it shouldn't be, because everybody experiences failure. I've said this before in other venues, but success is never guaranteed, but failure pretty much always is to some degree. Everyone has failed at some point, and not everyone always succeeds at what they mean to. So failure is not only acceptable, it's very much a uniting factor. And I think it's important to get, kids used to the fact that it's not a bad thing as long as you don't let it completely derail you. And gaming is great for that because, even if you fail in a tabletop RPG, typically that failure is temporary and the quest continues, which is very much allegorical for life. And in video games, you always have, not always, but a lot of times, especially for kids, you have respawn where it's just, okay, well, that didn't work, try again. And you can try as many times as you want. So, that's kind of how I feel about the role of failure in games. And as far as writing, I mean, you never know what's going to land with readers. You can educate yourself, you can try, but there is always a bit of timing. You might call it luck involved, but you have to be very comfortable with the idea that something you try is maybe not going to work, and getting up after that, and just kind of letting that be a part of the process as opposed to an ending to it.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I think that's all the questions we have specifically for this week. I want to thank our panelists very much for participating and telling us about their process a little bit. One last question for everybody. Are you a map geek or not when it comes to role-playing games? Ken, I suspect I know your answer, but are you a map geek?
I like my maps. I like my maps a lot. Like I said, I even for my books, I take old balls and from the internet pictures, and that's how I design my dungeons, and that's how I design buildings. And so yes, I like my maps. I'm kind of a map geek with that. I'm sad that it's so expensive in the books though, and even the ebook is kind of just to be able to fit them in it's not as easy as people think it is.
Oh no, it's definitely not, for sure.
So,
For sure.
yeah.
David, SG, are you guys big map geeks or not?
Yeah, I like a good map for sure.
Yeah, I love maps. I love just maps in general. I've written a book about a map maker, so that's how much I love maps. But I was on a panel for something yesterday about world building, and after I've kind of created a character, the next thing I do is draw a map for the world that I'm going to be in, because I need to know. Not only is it I like it, I just need to know where everything is, and I need to know, like, the whole setting. I need to know how far away things from and everything. I need to know, like, where these settlements are and what's around them, so what kind of town they are, and what they trade for, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I could look at maps all day. I love them.
Yeah.
Awesome.
From a functional standpoint, I think I like the idea of like having a character and then a board to play on, because it kind of brings you back to, like, for me, it was playing with like dolls or My Little Pony or whatever it was I played with. You can have, your little world, and then you can just tell your stories sort of however you want to.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm a Patreon of Dyson logos, so I love Dyson's maps, so I use them a lot. Shout out! He's not here. He's not paying. He's not supporting us, but shout out anyway, because those are fantastic maps. All right, excellent. So now it's time for our Go Indie Minute. This week, let me try that again. This week on Go Indie Now. Tomorrow night, you're going to get a double feature at 7 p.m. 21. These are all Eastern time, folks. 21 Grams, Season 5, Episode 20, the penultimate episode. Joe sits down with Rob Grimoire. Rob is a friend of mine as well. You're going to really enjoy that. He's a great writer, and an even better person. And tomorrow at 8, if you're watching this, you're probably interested in this one, is our next episode of Hit the Dice. Is employed by the Triangle Agency for a little St. Patty Days TTRPG. Triangle Agency is not explicitly about St. Patrick's Day, but this one will be. On Tuesday, season premiere of First Time for Everything, Season 2, Episode 1, with Juliette Rose as she welcomes Samantha Bryant. You're going to really enjoy that conversation. Wednesday at 8 p.m., series premiere of Page Numbers with Bob Magoo. I don't actually know what Page Numbers is, but Bob always brings the good content, so you'll enjoy that. Next Saturday at 7, we shine the spotlight on Move the Rain Collection Publishing, their 2024 Indie Producer of the Year. And of course, next Sunday, This Week in Indies returns with exploring how indie authors can foster meaningful reader connections through positivity and storytelling, and I will again be hosting for next week. So I hope you will be here, and I hope you will join us this week for our Go Indie items. And quick shout out to March of the Writers. This week we have on the 16th, that's today, how do you feel you've evolved as a writer from when you started? 17th, Writer Fuel Part 1, snacks. Before we conquer, sometimes we need to snack. What's your go-to fuel while reading or writing? The three P's on the 18th, plotter, pantser, and planter, which are you. 19, coffee or tea, or coffee versus tea, excuse me. Which wins and how do you have it? Where is the worst coffee / tea you've had and the best? 20, it's a date. Do you have events scheduled for the year or special meetups? That's as for writers, let us know. 21, we go together, or 21st, we go together. One of the absolute best things about writing is community. Tell us about your experience with the community and how some people have had an impact on you, both positive and negative, but hopefully positive. And the 22nd, have you ever, or would you ever enter a writing competition? If so, tell us about the experience. If it's not your, come on, there we go. Hold on. If it's not your cuppa, tell us why. I do not like writing competitions, and I don't know. I just don't. All right. So, but it might be different for you. I know a lot of people get into competitions and they really enjoy them. So that is all our announcements for this week. And now it's time for everyone's favorite game, Epilogue. So these are going to be, so as you know, or you may not know if you're here for the first time, for Epilogue, we ask a series of questions, and the last person standing gets to roll us out with, it's always time to go indie now. So first question, I mentioned it earlier. I had an opportunity to mention it, so I'm making this question, I'm adding this question in. What is my favorite dice? Is it the D6? Is it the D8? Is it the D12? Or is it the D10? Ken, which is it?
D12.
Okay. David?
12.
SG?
Yeah, D12.
Okay. That was easy. That's all right. It was a fun question anyway. Okay. All right. SG, we'll start with you for this one. Who was Gary Gygax's creative partner for Dungeons and Dragons? Was it A, Craig Stafford, B, Steve Perrin, C, Robin Laws, or D, Dave Arneson?
Oh, I was going to be a guess, so I'm just going to go with B.
Okay. David?
What was those names again? Sorry.
I'm sorry?
What was the names again? Sorry. I didn't quite catch them.
So A, Greg Stafford, B, Steve Perrin, C, Robin Laws, or D, Dave Arneson?
I think it's B, I think.
Ken?
A. No idea. Figure we'll just go. We should be close to right at this point.
So it is D, Dave Arneson. So David, you got it. So, all right. So let's go ahead and take us out here. SG, start with you. Go ahead and tell people where they can find you on the web.
Yeah, so you can always find me at my website, which is right here, right there, sgtosh.com. My books are available on Amazon. I am on Instagram and Facebook. And this is all, subject to change, but you'll always be able to find me at my website, sgtosh.com.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for being here today and sharing your experience with us.
Yes.
David?
Yeah, you can find me. So I was vibing out somewhere then. It's like listening to Sarah. You can find me here on my website, davidgreenwriter.com. All my socials are on there, except for Blue Sky. I've not added that onto my website yet, but I'm at Blue Sky at David Green Writer. And yeah, that's where you can find me. So come and say hello.
Thank you so much for being here and nerding out with us a little bit today.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ken.
I obviously didn't put it down there because I missed a part of the form, I suppose. But my website is kenlangauthor.com, which is where you can always find me. I'm on multiple social media sites that I do not know how to use. So if you need to reach out, it's easier to either do it by Facebook or preferably my website. I try to use the others, but I just never got the hang of it. So, and my books are on Amazon.
Awesome. Thanks for being here with us, Ken. Thanks for sharing. I'm your host and the worst production assistant in the world, SM Hillman. You can find me here on Go Indie Now. You can also check out my other stuff at my website or on Amazon for my book. And I believe David is going to take us out.
Yep. So it is always time to go indie now.